My name is Grace Meadows, and I am 28 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood in my grandmother's driveway, completely frozen as she asked me a question I had no way of answering. She had her old brown tote bag slung over her arm, the same one she has carried for as long as I can remember. Behind her, inside the foyer, 40-something relatives stood chatting. The white SUV my sister was driving sat third in the line of parked cars on the gravel. My grandmother looked at me and asked, "Gracie, darling, why are you arriving in an Uber?" Before I could even open my mouth, my mother answered for me. None of the people on that porch knew that my grandmother had actually spent 4 hours at the Department of Motor Vehicles that morning. That leather binder in my grandmother's tote had my name on tab 7, and she had already called my Uncle Anthony to bring his truck around at 6 p.m. sharp. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the place where you and I unpack the stories nobody dares to mention at Thanksgiving, the quiet ways family takes from you, and the moments someone finally hands it back. If you have never heard a story told slowly, stay with me. My family lives in Litchfield County, Connecticut. My grandmother, Eleanor, is 75 and lives in the colonial farmhouse my grandfather bought her back in 1979. She raised my mother and Uncle Ron there, and after my grandfather died 2 years ago, she stayed alone because that is exactly what she wanted. My parents live about 30 minutes south of her in a town called Goshen. My older sister, Tessa, lives 20 minutes away from them with her husband, Brett, and their 2 kids, Maddie and Owen. They moved out there 5 years ago when Brett got the finance manager job at Heritage Auto Group, the big dealership off Route 6. I live in Hartford, 90 minutes south of all of them. I am a software engineer at a fintech startup that just closed its Series C funding. I bought a 1-bedroom condo 2 years ago. I pay my own bills, and I cook for one most nights. I see my parents about once a month, my sister about once every 3, and my grandmother whenever she calls, which is actually quite often. In my family, I have always been the daughter who just handles things. I am the one who never asks, the one my mother describes to her real estate clients as so independent and understanding. If you have a sister, you probably know what that really means. It means I am the one they do not worry about, the one whose turn it always is to give. Until 3 weeks ago, that was the only version of myself I knew how to be. My SUV was a gift from my grandmother on my 24th birthday. She took me out alone that night to the Liberty Tree Inn, a wood-beamed place she and my grandfather had loved for 40 years. We ordered the trout, and she told me how he proposed in a grocery store parking lot. After dessert, she set her napkin down and said, "I have something to show you outside." Out in the parking lot sat a white Lexus RX 350 with a giant red bow on the hood. She handed me a small velvet pouch containing a silver keychain engraved with GM. "Your grandfather paid for the car before you passed," she said. "He told me to make sure you got it on your 24th, and he even picked the color." I cried right there in the parking lot, but she did not. She just wrote something in the brown leather binder she carried that night. It was a small notation, the kind she made for every single transaction in our family since my grandfather died. That binder had tabs and a strict system. That binder had a system. It had been my grandfather's first, and now it was hers. A week later, at a family dinner at my parents' house, my mother smiled at me without her eyes joining in. "Of course Grandma bought you a Lexus," she said, holding my hand across the table for 1 second too long. "Sweetheart, I'm going to keep the original title in our family safe just in case something happens. Insurance, accidents, anything. You will have a copy." I was 24, so I said yes. My sister Tessa is 2 years older than me. She married Brett Halverson 5 years ago at a vineyard outside New Milford in a wedding my parents helped pay for and I helped plan. They have 2 children, Maddie, 4, and Owen, 2. Tessa stays home and has since Maddie was born. She drives a 2014 Honda Pilot that she calls the dying horse every time she mentions it, which is constantly. Brett works long hours at the dealership and brings home a salary that lets them keep the house, but not much else. My mother loves my sister in a very particular way. She loves Tessa the way you love a child you understand. She has loved me the way you love a stranger who turned out to be related to you. Politely, at a measured distance, with frequent references to how impressive my independence is. Her favorite sentence about me, for as long as I can remember, has always been some version of this: Tessa has a family, but you are single, so you can be flexible. When I was 19 and got into Worcester Polytechnic, my mother sold my grandfather's lake house to cover Tessa's wedding venue deposit. When I graduated college at 22, she missed my graduation because Maddie had her first birthday and Tessa needed us. When I was 26 and paid off my student loans, she said, "That is wonderful, sweetheart, but Tessa is still struggling." I said yes to all of it, making the math work. Tessa's loss costs her a marriage and a mortgage. My loss just costs me a Saturday. That was the math for 28 years, until it was not. 6 months before my grandmother's 75th birthday party, my mother invited me up for a family lunch. It was just my parents and me. No Tessa. That should have been my first warning. We ate chicken salad on the back porch while my mother spent half the meal talking about a listing she had just closed in Bantam. My father was quiet, the way he always was when my mother was running a meal. Over coffee, she said, "Grace, honey, I need to update the SUV on our family umbrella insurance policy. Can you bring the registration card next time you come up?" I did not have it with me and told her so. "Email me a scan," she said, "or I can just pull the title from the safe. We have all your documents in there." I shrugged and said, "Sure, do whatever is easiest," thinking absolutely nothing of it. She nodded and made a small note on her yellow legal pad. Then she looked up. "Just to confirm, your full legal name? Your date of birth?" I recited both without thinking twice. I was eating salad and was not paying attention. At the end of lunch, my mother handed me a folded sheet of paper. "A copy of your title," she said, "just so you have one. The original stays in our safe. It is safer there." I tucked it into my purse, and when I got home, I put it in my glove compartment without looking at it. What I did not notice then was that the paper she handed me was not the original at all. It was just a black and white photocopy, a detail that would come back to haunt me. 3 weeks before my grandmother's 75th birthday party, I drove up to my sister's house on a Saturday to drop off a stuffed bear for Maddie. She had her birthday the week before, and I had missed the party because my company had a strict code freeze deadline. I pulled into Tessa's driveway in a rental Camry because my SUV had been at the shop for service for almost 3 months, according to my mother. I had been Ubering everywhere, completely unsuspected. As I pulled up, their garage door was open. You and I probably know how easily we trust our own family. But this was the moment everything changed. Tessa was unloading groceries from the back of a vehicle that was not her old Honda Pilot. I saw the license plate first, a Connecticut tag ending in 472. My plate on my white Lexus RX 350. A child's car seat was installed in the back, the kind with the bright orange straps Maddie had picked out for her 4th birthday. I stood at the edge of the driveway with the stuffed bear in my hand. Tessa turned around with grocery bags in her arms. "Oh," she smiled. "Mom did not tell you we had swapped?" "Swapped?" I said. "Yeah, Mom said you were okay with it. Brett got us a really good deal on it through the dealership," she explained as if it were nothing. She closed the garage door behind her with one elbow. "Want some coffee?" Brett is at work, but the kids are taking a nap. I declined, handed her the bear, and got back in my rental. I drove home in total silence for 90 minutes. I did not say one word about the SUV to her in that driveway because my hands were shaking violently, and I have never in my life made an important decision while my hands were shaking. That night, I called my mother at 7:15 on a Saturday evening. She picked up on the second ring with her cheerful real estate voice. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is my SUV parked at Tessa's house?" There was a tiny quarter-second pause on the other end of the line, just enough time for me to hear her assemble her practiced answer. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "I meant to tell you that Tessa needed it more. She has the kids, after all. You are single, and taking an Uber is actually more convenient for you anyway. Your sister needed it more." That was the exact sentence. It landed somewhere deep in the middle of my chest and just stayed there, heavy and cold. But she kept going. "Honey, I knew you would understand. You always understand. That is why you are the easy one. Tessa would have made a whole production out of it, but you just handle things." "Mom," I said quietly, "that car is in my name. We handled the paperwork. Brett knows people at the dealership. Do not make this complicated, Grace." My mother's voice was smooth and utterly dismissive over the phone line. "When did you handle paperwork?" I asked. "Months ago," she claimed, insisting we had discussed it. But we had not. There had been no conversation, just a brief chicken salad lunch and my date of birth recited over coffee. I did not say that to her. I just said I do not remember discussing it. "Sweetheart, you are so busy with work, you probably forgot. It was at one of our dinners. Do not make this into a thing," she said. Then she paused, and I braced myself for the part I knew was coming. "And Grace, you will not bring this up at Grandma's 75th. You will not ruin her birthday over a car. Do you hear me?" I hung up before she could say another word. I sat at my kitchen table, the plastic rental car keys heavy in my hand, staring at the photocopy of the title I had pulled out of the glove compartment that afternoon. The signature on the bottom was my name, but it was absolutely not mine. It was a replica, too perfect and yet completely wrong. I called my father on Sunday morning. He picked up from the back porch and I could hear the familiar metallic clink of the wind chime and birds bickering at the feeder. My mother was safely at church. "Dad," I said, "did I sign anything?" My father paused, and the heavy silence over the line told me the answer before he even opened his mouth. "Sweetheart, your mother handles family decisions. You know how she is," he said. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Dad, did I sign anything?" He breathed out a long, tired sigh. "I don't know what your mother did with that paperwork, Grace. I really don't. She handled the dealership end of it." "You didn't ask her about it," I pressed. "Grace, I have been married to your mother for 34 years. I do not ask." I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. "Your grandmother's been asking questions," he said, his voice dropping to a quiet whisper. "She is asking about the SUV and about the title," my dad continued. "I don't know why. She called your mother last week and asked who had done the transfer. Your mother told her you had signed it yourself, and then your grandmother went completely quiet on the phone." "Quiet how?" I asked. "Quiet the way Grandma goes quiet when she is writing something down." I felt a sudden cold weight settle deep in my chest. It wasn't relief, but it was something close to it. "Dad, has she said anything about her estate plan?" I asked. He paused. Your mother told me last month that Grandma was meeting with an attorney about updating it. Your mother has been beside herself ever since, my dad confessed. She thinks it is because of the SUV. Is it? I asked. Grace, I don't know. Honestly, I am trying not to know. I told him I loved him and hung up, sitting with the quiet for an hour. I decided two things right then. First, I would not bring up the SUV at my grandmother's 75th birthday party. I refused to let my mother control the narrative in front of 40 relatives. Second, I would find out exactly what my grandmother had been writing down. Monday morning at work, I was hopelessly distracted during our team stand-up. We were only 6 weeks out from a major security audit, and I was supposed to be presenting a retrospective on our authentication refactor. Instead, I stared at my screen, reading the exact same bullet point on my notes 3 times without processing a single word. My coworker, Sarah Whitmore, immediately noticed. Sarah is a 29-year-old senior engineer on my team, and she used to be a paralegal in Boston before switching to tech. She is the only person I know who actually reads legal contracts for fun. She cornered me in the office kitchen during lunch. Grace, out with it, she said. I gave her the short, messy version. My sister has my SUV, and my mother claims I gave it to her, but I never did. Sarah listened quietly. When I finished, she took a sip of her coffee, set the mug down, and asked, Grace, have you pulled the DMV record? I just stared at her. What? The Connecticut DMV lets you look up vehicle title status online, Sarah explained. It costs $12 and takes maybe 10 minutes. You just enter your VIN and you see exactly who the registered owner is. I stopped cold. I admit, I haven't done that, I said. Sarah watched me closely. Grace, if a coworker told you they had signed off on a production deployment and you couldn't remember doing it, you would be in the audit logs by lunch. You would not give them the benefit of the doubt for 3 months. But Sarah, it is family, I replied. That is why your standards should be higher, not lower, she said. I did not answer her. I went back to my desk and did not check the DMV record that day either. I told myself I would do it that night, but I didn't. It actually took my father forwarding me an old email about a tech conference in Maine before I finally forced myself to open the DMV page and type my VIN into the lookup window. The next day, my grandmother called me on Tuesday evening. She does not text. She has never texted a single word in her entire life. Instead, she calls at exactly 6 p.m. when she knows I am done with work, letting the phone ring until I pick up. Gracie, sweetheart, the party this Saturday, she began. I will be there, Grandma, I assured her. Are you driving up or do you need a ride from the train? I paused. I honestly had not figured out yet what I was going to do about transportation. In truth, I had not figured out what I was going to do about anything. I'll figure it out, Grandma, I promised. She was quiet for a long beat over the line. Then, her voice very gentle, she asked, Your mother told me you let Tessa have the SUV. Is that true? I weighed 2 distinct answers in my head. The first was painfully honest, which would start a war. The second was a specific kind of vague that did not lie, but also did not crack the emotional dam wide open just yet. I went with the second option. It is complicated, Grandma, I said. She did not push me on it. Instead, she simply said, Bring whatever paperwork you have. The title copy your mother gave you. The original purchase receipt if you can find it. Anything. Why? I asked. Your grandfather's old habit, she explained softly. We always kept duplicates of everything, and I want to make sure my files match yours. Through the receiver, I could hear the faint sound of her pen scratch against paper as she wrote something down. It was a short note, the precise kind of note that would eventually end up in a neat, tabbed binder. "Grandma, are you okay?" I asked. "I am always okay, Gracie," she paused. "I have been organizing your grandfather's papers. It has been very useful." She did not reveal what she had found, nor did she say what she was matching. She just told me she loved me, warned me to drive carefully on Saturday, and hung up. I sat in silence for a long time. On Wednesday afternoon, Tessa texted me. The text from my sister was 16 separate messages long. I read through the wall of text while standing in line at a local coffee shop. The summary of her request was simple. Could I please pick up the heavy table linens for the party from Williams-Sonoma in West Hartford on Friday afternoon? She explained that Brett needed the SUV this weekend to haul equipment for Maddie's preschool fundraiser, and she couldn't easily get out there with the kids. She added that it would mean so much to Mom, ending with a cheerful thanks and telling me I was the best. I stared at my screen, tipped my barista, and walked outside to call my sister. "Tessa," I said, "I do not have a car this week." "Oh, just Uber it," she said, her voice bright and unbothered. "It is only about a 12-minute drive." "Tessa, you are driving my SUV," I pointed out. There was a brief, telling pause over the line, just long enough for her to find her footing. "Grace, I just need it more right now. You know how it is," she said. And there it was again, the exact same dismissive sentence I had heard before, now echoed in my sister's voice like a second deployment of the family script, only dressed up with a little chirp at the end. I told her I would think about the linens. "Maddie's car seat is finally installed correctly," she added quickly, as if I had actually asked about it. "Brett did it, and it took him 2 hours. I can't take it out and put it back every single weekend, Grace. You understand." I just replied with a quiet, empty sigh. "And listen, please don't make this awkward at Grandma's, okay?" Tessa pleaded. "She doesn't need any stress at 75. You know how she gets." Actually, I did not know how my grandmother got because in 75 years on this planet, she had never once gotten anything but quieter and more deliberate. I told my sister I had to go, hung up, and skipped the linens entirely. I want to pause here for a second. You and I have probably both felt that sudden, sharp sting when a family member tells you a sibling needs something more than you do. If that sentence has ever rearranged something painful inside your own chest, I see you. Tell me that one word they always use to make you surrender, because I read every single comment. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we have not even gotten to my grandmother's reaction yet. Okay, let's get back to it. On Thursday night, my father called me directly from his accountant's office. He was working late on a complicated tax return, meaning my mother was at home and he was completely alone. "Grace," he said, his voice tense, "I am looking at your flight records from that tech conference in Maine, from March 12th to March 16th. "Dad?" I asked. "What is this about?" "You presented on a panel about API security on the afternoon of the 14th. I attended remotely from my office, and I still have the registration confirmation in my email. I also have your panel photo from the official website. I even have your hotel folio because you forwarded it to me last spring when you asked about the tax deduction," he added. I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. "Dad, why are you telling me all of this?" I asked. He breathed out slowly. "Because your mother told the dealership that you signed the transfer form on March 14th, in person, at Heritage Auto Group in West Hartford." In the silence that followed, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking loudly on the wall. "I love your mother, Grace. my father said softly. But I am not going to lie for her on this one. The records are in my email. I won't bring it up first, but if you ask, I will forward them to you tonight. Dad, I told him, send them to me. True to his word, he sent them 4 minutes later. There it was, United Flight 1842, Boston to Portland, departing at 9:14 a.m., the hotel folio, my conference badge photo, the speaker page archived from the conference website. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at undeniable proof that on the very day my mother claimed I had signed away my car, I was actually standing on a stage in Portland, Maine. At 10:30 p.m. on Thursday night, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the Connecticut DMV online vehicle title lookup, paid the $12, and typed in my VIN. I clicked Submit. The screen loaded, revealing the registered owner as Tessa Marie Halverson, effective March 14th, processed by Heritage Auto Group in West Hartford. I read the cold screen 3 times to make sure. I pulled up my main travel records side by side with the DMV lookup, my boarding pass, the Holiday Inn folio, and the conference website showing my bio and scheduled times. My panel had run from 1:30 to 3 p.m. on March 14th. On the exact day and time my mother claimed I was signing a vehicle transfer at a dealership in West Hartford. I was actually on a stage 240 miles north, giving a presentation about token rotation and authentication flows. I took screenshots of every single page. I saved it all into a secure desktop folder labeled March 14th Documentation. I backed it up to my personal email and my cloud account, then texted Sarah Whitmore 3 words. My friend was entirely right. Sarah replied to my email in less than 90 seconds, her words flashing on my screen like a warning flare. She told me to print out every single document immediately, 2 full copies of everything. She said I needed to download the official affidavit of forgery form directly from the Connecticut DMV website, take it straight to a bank the very next morning, and get it notarized. But she warned me not to file it yet, promising to explain her reasoning on Monday. When I asked her why, she typed back a cold truth. The moment I filed, my mother would be formally notified. For now, I had the only copy that mattered, which put me in the ultimate position of power. I printed every page that night, listening to the printer hum in the dark, unable to sleep. At 8 a.m. on Friday morning, I drove the rental Camry to the Connecticut DMV branch in Wethersfield. After an 18-minute wait in the quiet lobby, a clerk named Denise called me over to window 4. I kept my voice steady as I requested 3 items: a certified copy of the original Lexus title, showing my name as the registered owner from March 2021, a certified copy of the March 14th transfer form, and the Connecticut affidavit of forgery form. Denise typed away, and the printer behind her ran for a solid 2 minutes. When she slid the 3 warm sheets through the slot, my heart raced. I stood right there at the counter, looking at the transfer form first. At the bottom, the cursive signature read, Grace E. Meadows. But the loops were completely wrong. My actual signature has a flat-bottomed capital G because my grandfather taught me how to write, and he absolutely despised curled letters. But the signature on this paper had a distinct, theatrical swirl. My capital M always has sharp, deliberate peaks, while this version had soft, rounded arches, the way someone might carefully draw a letter when trying to fake it. Even the driver's license number was wrong, off by 2 transposed digits. The actual Connecticut number, 943881, was written as 948381. A regular clerk would only catch that error by cross-checking the state database. unless they purposefully ignored it. It made sense when I realized a clerk who knew the buyer's father-in-law had processed it. I paid the fees and slid the papers into a plain manila folder. I drove straight over to my bank branch on Farmington Avenue and had the affidavit of forgery notarized. The teller, a quiet woman named Patricia, stamped the document without asking a single question about why I needed it. On the drive home, the manila folder sat silently on the passenger seat, a heavy weight between us. I did not make any phone calls. I had no idea that at that exact same time, my grandmother was standing inside her own DMV branch up in Litchfield County. By Friday night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at two folders. One was labeled March 14th documentation, and the other was my notarized affidavit of forgery. My gut told me to drive to my parents' house right then, slam both folders onto the dining room table, and force my mother to confess in front of my father, who could no longer pretend he didn't know. But then I stopped myself. I knew exactly how my mother operated. The second I confronted her, she would dial my sister and Uncle Ron, controlling the narrative before any of us even set foot in my grandmother's house on Saturday. She would dismiss me instantly, telling everyone that Grace is just being dramatic, or that Grace is crying over spilled milk, or that Grace simply doesn't understand how family decisions are made. Showing my hand too early would only turn those folders against me. So, I made a conscious choice to do absolutely nothing. I wouldn't bring any documents or carry any folders to the party. Instead, I would order an Uber, put on my classic navy dress along with my grandmother's vintage pearl earrings, show up, smile, and eat their food. I would raise a glass to toast my grandmother, answer whatever questions came my way with complete honesty, and volunteer absolutely nothing else. True power wasn't slamming a physical folder onto a dining room table for a dramatic reveal. Real power was simply knowing that the folders existed. I walked over to my bedside table and opened the top drawer. Resting right where I had left it 3 months ago, after my sister Tessa took my SUV, was the heavy silver keychain my grandmother gave me for my 24th birthday. The engraved initials, GM, still glinted under the soft light. I picked it up, feeling its cold weight in my palm, before gently setting it back down. "Not yet," I whispered. I shut the drawer, drank a glass of water, tried reading a dry textbook for 40 minutes, and finally went to bed without remembering a single word. At the time, I had absolutely no idea what was going to unfold the next afternoon. The only thing I knew for certain was that I was done pretending, and that realization alone gave me immense peace. On Saturday morning at 9 a.m., my apartment buzzer broke the silence. I glanced at the security camera monitor and caught my breath. My grandmother was standing out in the hallway, wearing a simple gray cardigan and her worn gardening shoes, with her heavy brown canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. She had driven 90 minutes south, entirely unannounced, on the very morning of her own 75th birthday celebration. I buzzed her in. When she stepped inside, she didn't offer a hug. She just placed her tote bag on the kitchen counter and asked for coffee. I quickly brewed a cup, adding cream but no sugar, exactly the way she always liked it. She sat down at my small kitchen table, looking up at me with absolute seriousness. "Gracie," she began, "I am going to ask you just one question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I am not angry with you. I am simply asking." I swallowed hard and said, "Yes, Grandma." "Did you sign a title transfer for that vehicle?" I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "No, Grandma." She nodded once, very slowly, accepting my words. She reached into her brown tote bag and pulled out the old leather binder. It was my grandfather's ledger, its edges softened by decades of use, with a brass clasp on the front worn down to a deep, dark patina from 40 years of his hands handling it. She flipped open the pages to tab 7, kept the details hidden from my sight, and then snapped the binder shut. I have kept records of every family transaction since he passed away 2 years ago, she murmured. Your grandfather told me to keep these records, she explained quietly, taking a slow sip of her coffee. He said that someday they would matter, though he didn't know which way things would go. She set her cup down and looked at me. I want you to come to the party today, and I want you to trust me entirely. Do not say a single word about this. Do not bring any of your legal papers. Just show up. I nodded and said, Yes, Grandma. She stood up, gathered her things, and slung the tote over her shoulder. At the front door, she paused and added, And Gracie, order an Uber to get there. Do not drive yourself. I need you to arrive exactly that way. She walked down the hallway, and I watched the elevator indicator descend to the lobby. I closed the door, locked it, and spent the rest of my morning slowly getting ready. I took my time in the shower, letting the hot water clear my mind before carefully steaming my favorite navy dress. I adorned myself with the delicate pearl earrings my grandmother had gifted me for my high school graduation. They were small and simple, the type of jewelry you completely forget you are wearing. At 1 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Tessa, reading, Don't forget the linens. Brett is driving the SUV out, so we will see you there soon. I chose not to reply. I had not picked up the table linens, nor had I bothered to inform my mother of that fact. She had texted me 3 times over the past 48 hours asking about them, and I had left every single message unread. If she wanted those linens so badly, she could send Brett to Williams-Sonoma in the very SUV he was so thrilled to drive. I wondered what my grandmother was planning. I had absolutely no idea what she was cooking up, and I couldn't even begin to picture it. All I knew for sure was that she had paid a visit to her local DMV branch on Friday morning, and that her old leather binder now contained a brand new tab. I put my complete trust in her, and honestly, that was my entire game plan. At exactly 3:30 p.m., I pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber. It was a silver Toyota Camry, with an estimated arrival time at my grandmother's estate of 5:14 p.m., even though the party itself was scheduled to start at 5. As we coasted up the Merritt Parkway, I stared out the window at the passing trees. Connecticut in May is stunning, with the fresh spring leaves glowing in that unreal, vibrant pale green. I found myself thinking of my grandfather, who passed away 2 years ago. He would have sorted this mess with a single phone call. I kept thinking about my grandmother, a woman who possessed the rare patience to wait until she was fully prepared, instead of striking when it was simply convenient. I realized something profound on that quiet drive. I might be the daughter of a woman who chose her clear favorite, but I am also the granddaughter of a woman who chose me. And that was more than enough to steady my nerves. At 5:14 p.m., the Uber slowly made its way up my grandmother's long gravel driveway. A massive white tent was set up in the backyard, visible through the side gate, with romantic string lights already twinkling against the late afternoon sun. A caterer's van was parked along the fence, and more than 40 cars lined the road in both directions. I stepped out, tipped the driver, and watched the Camry disappear. My cousin Sophie waved from the porch, shouting, "Gracie, where's your car?" I replied, "It is a long story." I walked right in through the heavy front door, immediately stepping into a packed foyer. My grandmother's only sister, Aunt Marcy, was warmly hugging Uncle Ron's wife near the coat closet, while my cousin Jen balanced little Owen on her hip. Caterers carrying silver trays piled high with stuffed mushrooms navigated through the buzzing crowd. In the dining room, my sister Tessa stood, wearing an elegant green wrap dress, deep in conversation with two of my mother's close friends, while young Maddie ran energetic circles around the table. Brett lingered by the bar in the corner, one hand tucked casually into his pocket and a glass of dark liquor in the other. Glancing through the dining room window, I spotted my white Lexus RX 350 parked proudly at the very front of the driveway, its license plate ending in 472. Just then, my mother emerged from the kitchen in a cream blazer and locked eyes with me. My mother's face lit up in that performative way she reserved for when she had an audience watching. "Sweetheart, you made it!" she beamed, gesturing toward my sister. "Doesn't Tessa look wonderful?" Just then, my grandmother stepped out of the kitchen behind her. She had changed into a pale blue dress, with her familiar brown tote bag still slung over her shoulder. The moment she saw me, she walked slowly across the crowded foyer. The entire room turned to watch her, without even realizing they were doing it. She stopped right in front of me, her voice ringing out clear and calm. "Gracie, darling, why did you arrive in an Uber? What happened to the beautiful SUV we bought you for your 24th birthday?" Instantly, the room fell dead silent. Before I could speak, my mother stepped in. My mother's voice was bright, pitched deliberately high so it would carry all the way to the back of the kitchen. "Oh, Mama," she giggled nervously. "Grace let Tessa have the SUV. You know how Grace is, always so incredibly understanding. Tessa simply needed it more with the young children." There it was, out in the open, spoken in public. For the third time, the exact same phrase had come out of 3 different mouths with the same entitled shape and the same heavy weight. Your sister needed it more. Instantly, all 40 guests froze in their tracks. Aunt Marcy's wine glass stopped dead, hovering halfway to her mouth. Uncle Ron slowly set down a half-eaten stuffed mushroom and did not reach for another. Even my cousin Jen stopped rocking little Owen and slowly looked up at us. My grandmother completely ignored my mother, keeping her sharp eyes locked onto me. "Is that what actually happened, Gracie?" she asked gently. My voice sounded quiet when I replied, far smaller than I expected it to be under the heavy weight of 40 staring eyes, but it remained absolutely steady. "No, Grandma," I said. My mother's plastered-on smile instantly tightened around the edges as she hissed, "Grace, sweetheart, what on earth are you saying? We discussed this whole arrangement months ago, so please, do not be confusing right now." Tessa suddenly materialized beside my mother, holding Owen back in her arms, her hair elaborately styled in a way that must have taken someone 2 hours to perfect. "Grace?" my sister called out to me. But I didn't look at Tessa, and I didn't look at my mother. I stared directly at my grandmother, holding her steady gaze, and repeated the exact same words I had already told her. "No, Grandma, I did not give Tessa the SUV." She gave a single slow nod, like someone who already knew the truth, but just needed to hear me say it out loud to seal it. Then, she turned her head toward my sister. "Tessa, sweetheart, can I please see the keys to the Lexus?" The tension in the living room was suffocating. Nobody dared to breathe, let alone speak. The caterer stood frozen in the dining room doorway, and the faint hum of the string lights out on the patio felt incredibly loud in the silence. Tessa shot a panicked look at our mother, but Mom refused to meet her eyes. That was when Brett stepped forward from the bar. "Of course, Grandma," Brett said, reaching into his pocket. He fished out the keys and held them across the foyer. My grandmother took them with her right hand. I watched the silver keychain, engraved with the GM logo, glint under the chandelier. She did not even look at them. Instead, she slipped the entire keyring into the front right pocket of her knit cardigan. Then she locked her eyes onto Brett. Brett, you are the finance manager at Heritage Auto Group, correct? He gave a quick, "Yes, ma'am." She pressed on. Was the title transfer for this vehicle processed at your dealership? Brett shot a nervous look at Tessa, then at my mother, before looking back at my grandmother. Yes, ma'am. Family transfer. Standard procedure. Right then, my mother's voice cut in over the top of him. It was that overly warm, fake hostess voice of hers, the exact one she used when a high-stakes real estate listing went sideways at an open house. Mama, please, this is a birthday party, she pleaded. Can we not turn this into a legal debate? Let us just eat. The caterer has... Grandma completely ignored her. Her eyes never left Brett's face. Brett, did you personally verify Grace's identity at the time of that transfer? Brett did that telltale thing people do when they realize they are in serious trouble. He shifted his weight uneasily, his eyes darting down to the floor for a quiet second. Brett looked up again, his voice cracking slightly. Her mother had her documents. Diane brought everything in. We do family transfers all the time at the dealership, ma'am. All the time. Yes, ma'am. My grandmother did not say a word. She just let the heavy silence hang in the air for 2 full beats. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the caterer start to slowly, quietly, back out of the dining room doorway, trying to escape the blast zone. That was when Grandma reached into the brown tote bag hanging from her shoulder. My mother whispered, her voice losing its sweet edge. Mama, please. But Grandma ignored her, lifting out a heavy brown leather binder and setting it down on the foyer credenza with a soft, solid thunk. I finally spoke up. Honestly, I was surprised by how steady and cold my own voice sounded. Flat, quiet, not seeking permission from anyone in that room. Mom, I never signed anything. My mother spun around to face me. In an instant, her tone shifted yet again, becoming sickeningly sweet as she put on a performance of maternal concern. Grace, sweetheart, of course you did. We discussed it back in February. You said it was completely fine. You just do not remember because you have been so incredibly overworked at that little tech startup of yours. I looked her dead in the eye. When in February? I do not remember the exact day, she stammered. Around the 14th. Of February or March? I asked. She paused. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Either, she lied. Around then, my mother repeated. I took a deep breath. Mom, I was at a tech conference in Portland, Maine from March 12th through 16th. I was on United Flight 1842 departing Boston Logan at 9:14 a.m. I gave a panel presentation on API security on the afternoon of the 14th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. I let that piece of information hang in the room. The dealership in West Hartford claims I signed the family transfer form in person that day. But there is a conference photo on the panel page. I am in my blue blazer. You would definitely recognize it. My mother's face did something I had never seen before. The fake smile stayed plastered on, but her eyes went dead. Then I added one more thing. I did not say it loudly, and there was absolutely no satisfaction in my voice. It was completely dry, the exact same tone I would use with my coworker Sarah in the office kitchen. I am a software engineer, Mom. I keep digital receipts of everything. Aunt Marcy, standing somewhere off to my left, let out a short, sharp breath. It was not a laugh, but rather a sound of pure recognition. My grandmother slowly placed her hand on top of the brown leather binder resting on the foyer credenza. She tapped the cover once with her index finger, choosing not to open it just yet. Slowly, she turned her gaze back to my mother, her expression completely unreadable. If you are still with me, and I hope you are, drop the word binder in the comments. What happened next is the exact reason this video has the title it does. If you know a woman whose family has a major paper trail problem with her, share this. She will know who I mean. Hit subscribe and let us keep going. My grandmother turned the brown binder so it faced the crowd. She flipped to tab 7 and lifted out 2 sheets of paper, holding them up in front of 40 people. In her right hand was a certified copy of the original Connecticut title for the Lexus RX 350, dated March 8, 2021. Owner, Grace Elizabeth Meadows. Notarized, stamped, and issued by the Litchfield County DMV. The sheet of paper in her left hand was a certified copy of the March 14th transfer form processed at Heritage Auto Group in West Hartford. The new owner was listed as Tessa Marie Halverson, and the signature line at the very bottom read Grace E. Meadows. My grandmother held the 2 documents side by side. Without raising her voice, she spoke to my mother in the exact same quiet, disappointed tone she used with me when I was 8 years old and had done something wrong. Diane, these signatures are not the same. Look at the G. My mother refused to look. Diane, look at the letter G. Finally, my mother looked. Meanwhile, Aunt Marcy was already moving quietly, without drawing any attention, until she was standing right next to my grandmother's elbow. Uncle Ron had quietly set his glass down on the wooden credenza, completely focused on the drama. Cousin Jen had seamlessly handed baby Owen over to Cousin Sophie and pulled out her cell phone. She kept the screen facing down, not recording anything, but just gripping it tightly, the way someone holds a heavy object when they are tense. My grandmother spoke in a gentle, diagnostic voice, like a doctor inquiring about a symptom. Diane, did you sign Grace's name on this legal form? My mother's mouth opened and closed. She tried her first defense, attempting to make it sound official. Mama, I had authority. She is my daughter. Grandma shut it down. You do not have legal authority over an adult daughter. You have not since she turned 18. My mother's eyes instantly filled with tears. It felt incredibly stage-managed at first. I had seen this exact performative crying routine of hers at 3 separate real estate open houses and at least 2 of Tessa's high school events. Mama, I did this for Tessa, for the good of this family, she sobbed. She has the kids to think about. Grace does not even drive that much anyway. She Ubers everywhere because she lives in the city. Grandma's voice remained cold and steady. That is not an answer, Diane. My mother pleaded. Mama, please, not here in front of everyone. But my grandmother did not soften for a second, nor did she raise her voice. She just stood exactly where she was, unmoving. And that quiet stillness was somehow far worse than any screaming match. Tessa spoke up, her voice tiny, eyes locked on the carpet. Grace, please, we can fix this, my sister stammered. I really did not know it was not done properly. Brett said it was, that it was all standard. By now, Brett's face had gone completely white, the color of computer paper. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, stared hard at the screen, and then glanced out the dining room window where the stolen Lexus was parked in the driveway. He looked back at his screen, sweating. I need to step outside for a minute and call my manager. My grandmother turned her gaze slowly toward him, her voice chillingly calm. Yes, I imagine you do. And Brett, you may want to go ahead and remove the baby car seat from the back before you place that call to him. Brett stared at the Lexus through the window. Without saying a single word to my sister, he walked out the front door, the screen door clicking shut behind him. My mother sat down hard in the foyer chair. She kept talking, and this time, the tears actually seemed real, or at least close to real. Honestly, with her, it is always hard to tell. Mama, you do not understand, she sobbed. Tessa has been struggling so much. Between the kids, Brett's salary, and their mortgage being such a stretch, they simply cannot afford— My grandmother raised her right hand. It was a small, quiet gesture, like a school teacher silencing an entire classroom. My mother stopped talking. I am not finished, Diane. My mother went completely still. My grandmother turned slowly to the crowd in the foyer, 40 guests who had come to celebrate her 75th birthday and were now staring in shock at 5:23 p.m. on a Saturday. I want to apologize to everyone for the timing of this, she said. I had planned to handle this privately, but my daughter chose to announce Grace's gift to all of you 20 minutes ago. So we are going to address it the exact same way. She paused to let it sink in. Aunt Marcy stood quietly beside her. Eleanor, what do you need? Grandma's hand touched her sister's elbow for a second in a brief thank you. Marcy, will you ask Anthony to bring his truck around to the front of the house? I called him this morning. He should be on the road already. Aunt Marcy nodded and walked to the front door, opening it wide. Through the open door, we could hear it in the distance. The low, distinct diesel growl of a flatbed approaching down the rural road. My grandmother turned back to my mother cowering in her chair. Diane, at 8 a.m. this morning, I went to the Litchfield County DMV branch. My attorney met me there at 7:30. I want you to listen carefully to what I am about to say. My mother sat there, forced to listen, while my grandmother kept her voice completely level. At 8:15 this morning, I filed 3 documents at the Litchfield County DMV, Grandma said. First, an affidavit of forgery signed by Grace yesterday and notarized at her bank on Farmington Avenue. Second, a formal letter on Grace's behalf from my attorney, Mr. Halloran of Halloran and Whitfield in Torrington. Third, an application to transfer the vehicle title from Tessa Marie Halverson to Eleanor Vance, pending a state fraud investigation. She paused, looking at my mother. The title is in my name as of 9:20 this morning. The DMV cleared it after reviewing the affidavit and flight records. Behind my mother, my father did not flinch. He stood by the bookshelf, hands in his pockets. Have you ever watched a train wreck happen in slow motion? That is exactly how it felt as my mother whispered, her voice cracking as she pleaded. Mama, please, you cannot do this. Tessa needs that car. The kid's car seat is already in it. But my grandmother just looked at her, cold and steady, and said, I have done it, Diane. It is done. Then she turned her gaze to Brett, who was standing frozen in the front doorway with his phone pressed to his ear. Brett, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. I want you to know something before you finish that call. At 9:45 this morning, my attorney's office faxed the affidavit of forgery and a copy of the dealership's transfer form to the Connecticut DMV Investigations Unit. My grandmother did not stop there. She looked right at him and said, Your district manager will be receiving a phone call from the state on Monday morning. You may want to prepare your statement before he calls you. I watched as the remaining color drained completely from Brett's face. He stood there, holding the phone to his ear, utterly motionless. Then, Her voice softened just a fraction, speaking only to him. "I am sorry, Brett. You are a young man with 2 children, but the violation is yours." He slowly stepped out onto the front porch, the screen door clicking shut behind him. Through the glass, I saw him press his hand flat against his forehead in sheer panic. My grandmother did not even look back. She turned her attention back to my mother, who was slumped in the armchair. "Diane," she said, but my mother could not even look up to answer. "I am going to tell you something now in front of everyone here, because you chose to take credit for Grace's generosity in front of them 20 minutes ago. That was a lie, and I am going to correct it right now." She paused, letting the silence heavy up the room. 2 weeks ago, I instructed my attorney to revise my estate plan. As of last Tuesday, all decisions regarding family assets, gifts, distributions, advances, and withdrawals from the trust your grandfather and I set up for the grandchildren go through Mr. Halloran. They do not go through you. The discretionary authority I gave you 3 years ago after your grandfather died is officially rescinded, she declared. My mother tried to stammer out an excuse, but grandmother cut her off instantly. "I can do this, and I am doing it." There it was, those final words that sealed her fate. My mother gasped, pressing her hand flat against her chest as if she had been struck. She looked desperately across the foyer at my father, but he did not move an inch toward her. He just stared at her with a look of profound, quiet defeat, an expression I had only ever seen on him at his own father's funeral. He was sad, finished, yet completely present. He was not going to save her. Instead of defending her, he walked slowly across the foyer, knelt beside her chair, and placed his hand gently over hers without saying a word. Aunt Marcy spoke up from beside my grandmother, her voice cutting through the tension. "Diane," she whispered, "you did this to your own daughter." That was when my mother started sobbing. Not the performative, polite tears she used for show, but real, ugly crying. Her voice sounded so small as she wept. "I just wanted Tessa to have something," she sniffled. "She has the kids. Grace has everything. The condo, the job, the new title. Grace does not even need a car." Hearing her say my name like that made me speak up, calmly and without anger. "Mom," I said softly, "I have a job. Tessa has 2 children and a husband. Those are completely different things, and I am not the one who has everything here." The entire room seemed to hold its breath for a long, heavy second after those words left my mouth. I did not even look at my sister as I spoke. My eyes were locked entirely on my mother. Her head slowly bowed, her gaze dropping down to her own knees in defeat. Then, my grandmother turned her attention to my father. She had not addressed him directly all afternoon, but now her voice softened as she prepared to speak to him in front of everyone left in the room. My father looked up at her, still kneeling beside my mother. "You forwarded Grace those flight records on Thursday night without being asked twice," grandmother said. "I want you to know that I noticed, and your daughter noticed, and the record will reflect that you did the right thing when it counted. That truly matters." My father stayed quiet, but he nodded once, slowly, the way men of his generation do when they are holding back tears. He kept his hand resting on my mother's, but it was not a gesture of forgiveness. He was just staying. In 58 years on this earth, that was the closest he ever came to choosing my side without completely destroying his own. Outside, the deep rumble of Uncle Anthony's diesel flatbed truck echoed through the open screen door as he pulled into the gravel driveway. The heavy crunch of his tires was the loudest sound left in the house. He came to a stop right in front of the porch, but he did not get out of the cab. As my grandfather's best friend for 40 years and grandmother's brother-in-law for 60, he knew exactly what was happening today. He knew his job. My grandmother turned her gaze back to me. "Gracie," she said, "the keys." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the heavy silver keychain, making the metal catch the bright dining room light one more time. If you have ever had someone finally stand up for you, you know how incredibly surreal it feels. I looked down at the initials GM engraved on the silver, my grandfather's lettering, made by a local jeweler in Litchfield back in 2021. She held them out, and I stepped forward to take them from her hands. "Anthony is going to tow the car to my house tonight," she explained. "The title is mine on paper until the state investigation wraps up. After that, it goes back in your name on a clean, original certificate. No co-owner, no parents policy. Mr. Halloran will handle the paperwork with you next week, and you will sign it yourself." "Yes, Grandma," I whispered. Then she looked up at me and asked if I could drive her home tonight in her car. "I would like to leave this party now," she said quietly. "I think we have done what we came here to do." I squeezed my hand shut around the metal keys, holding them so tightly the cold silver engraving pressed deep into my palm. "Yes, Grandma," I told her. "I can absolutely drive you home." She gave me a single, firm nod. She grabbed the brown leather binder off the credenza, packed it into her tote, and walked toward the exit. She did not glance back at my mother, my sister, or my father. Outside, Uncle Anthony climbed down from his truck and began preparing the flatbed straps. We walked toward the foyer closet where Aunt Marcy was already waiting to help my grandmother with her coat. They moved with the familiar rhythm of two sisters who had been doing exactly this for over 60 years. Back in the dining room, my mother remained slumped in her chair, my father still kneeling silently by her side. My sister Tessa stood staring out the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She was watching Uncle Anthony attach the heavy straps to the front wheels of the white Lexus. Her 4-year-old daughter, Maddie, walked over and pulled on her green dress, asking, "Mommy, why is that man taking our white car?" Tessa did not say a word. When Maddie tugged on her dress again, Tessa simply picked her up and kissed the top of her head, completely avoiding her question. Outside on the front porch, Brett was still pacing with his phone, his tense silhouette visible through the side window. He had been standing in the exact same spot for 5 straight minutes. Right before stepping out, my grandmother paused. She looked back at my mother one last time. "Diane, I will call you next week," she said. "We will talk about what your access to this family looks like going forward. I am not cutting you off entirely, but things have changed." My mother kept her eyes glued to her knees, refusing to look up. Then my grandmother addressed my sister at the window, her voice softening just a bit. "Tessa, you are my granddaughter. I will see you at Christmas. We will discuss a payment plan for your portion of the legal fees then." Tessa just nodded silently, keeping her face buried in Maddie's hair. Before leaving, grandmother addressed the remaining guests with total poise. "Thank you all for coming, and I am truly sorry for the disruption. Please, stay and enjoy the food." I walked her out to her Cadillac, the cool night air hitting my face. 2 weeks later, Brett was fired from Heritage Auto Group after his manager audited the digital logs from March 14th. The Connecticut DMV Investigations Unit opened a formal review, suspending his dealer license immediately. Tessa ended up driving the SUV back to grandmother's place the very next morning. She had to take a part-time job at a small insurance office in Bantam to make ends meet, while Brett was forced to accept a low-level finance role at a tiny dealership in Waterbury for half of his previous salary. My mother, meanwhile, tried calling me 27 times over the first 8 days. I never answered. She left 2 voicemails. The first was incredibly defensive, claiming this whole thing was blown out of proportion and that we needed to talk like adults. The second voicemail came late on the 6th night. It was just her voice, crying, repeating the words, "Sweetheart, please," 3 times before hanging up. I did not reply to either message. On the 9th day, my father sent me a short email. It was only 3 sentences long. "I am proud of you for not yelling. I am sorry I waited. Whenever you are ready, I would like to take you to lunch." I have not written back to him yet. I am still thinking about it, but I know I will eventually. That Saturday, 2 weeks after the dinner, I drove my rental car back up to my grandmother's house. The brown binder sat right there on her coffee table. Inside the binder, under tab 7, there was a brand new page added behind the original. It was a photocopy of a clean replacement title dated just 3 days ago, with only one name listed as the owner, Grace Elizabeth Meadows. At the top, my grandmother had written a single word in her elegant handwriting: resolution. We sat down for tea in her quiet kitchen. She stood looking out the window above the sink, watching 2 bright red cardinals at the bird feeder. Without turning around, she said, "Gracie, I owe you an apology for something I should have said 20 years ago. Your mother has been deeply jealous of you since you were 7. She turned to face me. "Your grandfather and I saw it, but we foolishly thought we should stay out of how your parents raised you. We were wrong. I should have stepped in 20 years ago, and I am so sorry I waited." I reached across the table. "Grandma, you stepped in now, and that is what matters." She sighed, pouring more tea. "Yes, but 20 years is a long time to wait for the adults to do the right thing." We sat in silence, letting that truth settle. Then she pulled the silver keychain from her cardigan and slid it to me. "The car is in my garage," she said. "Drive it home tonight. The investigation closes on Friday." I picked up the heavy metal keychain, closing my fist around it until the edges bit into my skin, before slipping it into my jeans pocket. "Thank you, Grandma," I muttered. "You are welcome, Gracie," she replied softly. I finally said the words I had been chewing on during the entire drive up. "I won't be at my mother's for Christmas this year," I told her. "I will be at yours." She gave a single nod, neither surprised nor pleased, just looking satisfied, like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. "Yes, Gracie, you will," she promised. I drove my SUV home that night, the keys pressing against my thigh through my pocket for 90 minutes. Maddie's car seat had already been ripped out of the back the day after the party. Tessa picked up the car seat from my grandmother's garage and strapped it back into the Honda Pilot. I haven't seen Maddie or Owen since, but I will. The kids were never the boundary. I will be there for their birthdays, but I will not be there for my mother's birthday. That is what a real boundary is. It is not a massive wall around your whole life. It is just a line drawn around the specific person who crossed it. After 28 years of being the dutiful daughter who handled everything, I finally learned something important. You do not need to scream to be heard, and you do not need a binder of your own. You just need one trusted family member who keeps one. And you need to listen to her when she tells you to take an Uber. So, that is my story. It all comes down to one forged signature, one thick leather binder, and one patient grandmother who knew exactly when to wait and when to act. If my journey has taught you anything, let it be a reminder to go and double-check the title on your own vehicle this week before it is too late. You and I both know how easily trust can be broken by the people we least expect. If this story resonated with you, please share this video with just one person who might need to hear it. Don't forget to drop a comment below with your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button to support the channel, and I will see you in the very next one.